So I've had more than a few people try to save my soul over the years. I imagine some of you might be able to relate. Raise your hand. Anyone tried to save your soul? I think the most valiant effort was on the part of a friend of mine in high school who was a self-proclaimed Jesus freak. She once took me and our other non-believer friend to see the movie Left Behind in theaters. So if you haven't heard of Left Behind, how many people have? I'm curious. Okay, that's a good number. But if you haven't, it's based on a series of books by a Christian author with the premise that the apocalypse has come. And we've had more and more of these apocalypse movies in the past few years. But in this one, all the believers had been raptured. So they knew the apocalypse had come because all the Christians, all the folks who believed that Jesus was their Savior had disappeared. And in some cases, they left their clothes behind. They just disappeared off the face of the earth because they had all been taken up to heaven, and only the non-believers remained on earth. So the movie follows a group of these non-believers who are here on earth. And it's an earth that it's about to be ravaged with fires and plagues and, of course, the rule of the Antichrist. So it's not a particularly well-done movie. And I wouldn't be standing here today if it had succeeded in converting me, in saving my soul. Our Universalist heritage leaves us to be a bit critical of any claim that only some will be saved. Universalism is that age-old heresy that salvation is not just for the select few, nor is it even based on your deeds that you do in life, but is universal. Universalism. Back in the 1700s and 1800s, Universalist circuit riders rode all around New England, offering an antidote to the other circuit riders who were out there, the fire and brimstone type, the type that may have talked about that rapture a little bit. These Universalist preachers had one message, just one. God is love, they said, and a loving God would never condemn anyone to hell. A loving God would never condemn anyone to an eternity of suffering. Now, one of the most famous of these circuit riders was Hosea Ballou. You may have, I hope you've heard that name before. He was born right here in New Hampshire and was raised in a strictly Calvinist household. So, meaning he believed in that, or his family believed at least, that only that select few were saved. At some point, Ballou realized that there was a certain dissonance in the belief in a loving, all-powerful God, and in the belief, on the other hand, that only that chosen few, would go to heaven. So Ballou, being a precocious child, went straight to the source and scoured the Bible for an explanation of this dissonance. He found nothing. And by the age of 19, was preaching a new story, the story of universal salvation. He says, ministers who threaten death and destruction employ weapons of weakness. Argument and kindness are alone effectual, flavored by the principles of divine love. That was his message, divine love. Now, as our beliefs have evolved over the years and mainstream Christianity has, in many cases, begun to accept the idea of universal salvation, our universalism, our Unitarian Universalism, has taken on new forms. So nowadays we talk about universalism in terms of our interconnection, the way that we are each connected to one another, and in terms of the inherent worth and dignity of each and every one of us, and each and every person who is outside of these walls. We no longer think about what might happen after death. That doesn't matter so much to us, but about what our calling might be during our time on this earth. Traditional Calvinist doctrines taught that salvation was an individual matter. It was up to each individual. Not only that, it was only for the select few and happened in this next life. You had to wait for it and just kind of hope that you were one of the select. Unitarian Universalist theology tells us just the opposite. Salvation is a communal matter, as we heard from Rebecca Parker. Salvation is for all. And the possibility for salvation happens only in this world. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't believe that we can be individually saved. None of us are saved until all of us are saved. Salvation isn't something that we can just wait and hope will happen to us. It's something that we participate in. It's up to us, to all of us, to participate in building the world we dream about, to do what we can to create heaven right here in this world. This is no easy task. In the Jewish tradition, this work, the work of salvation, is called tikkun olam, a Hebrew phrase meaning the healing of the world. It speaks to the idea that all of us have a part in that healing. In the Kabbalah, the text of the Jewish mystics, there is a story about the beginning of the world that starts with the Ein Sof, the holy darkness. In the beginning of time, before our world was born, the Ein Sof was all that existed. Then, at some moment in history, a great ray of light emerged from the heart of that holy darkness, a great ray of light. And in that ray of light was our world, the world of 1,000 things. But then, there was an accident. And the vessels holding the light of the world, the wholeness of our world, shattered. And the light of the world was scattered into 1,000 fragments of light, which fell. These fragments fell into all people and all events. And there they remain hidden to this very day. Now, Rabbi Rachel Naomi Remen tells us that this is where the idea of tikkun olam comes from. She writes, "The whole human race is a response to this accident. We are here because we are born with the capacity to find that hidden light, to find those little fragments of light in all events and all people, and to lift it up and make it visible again. And therefore, to restore the innate wholeness of the world." Now, I see this story as speaking directly to the universalist notion of sin as a state of disconnection. Our world is rife with disconnection, full of the experience of us versus them, full of competition and a culture of scarcity, the sense that there is not and cannot be enough to go around. Too often, we give in to this sense of disconnection. Too often, we respond with fear or hatred instead of responding with love. Now, a week and a half ago, I went to a Baltimore solidarity protest in Manhattan. I went because I had seen one too many images of police brutality in Baltimore and across the country. And I went because my colleagues of color had called for us to stand up and speak out against the institutionalized systems of racial and economic violence, including police torture and mass incarceration, that have targeted Black and poor communities in Baltimore for decades. I went to stand on the side of love, as we are called to do by our Unitarian Universalist faith. And I did witness love there. The couple thousand people who had gathered chanted and cheered and prayed in solidarity with those in Baltimore, with the family of Freddie Gray, and with all those across the country who suffer under the reign of institutionalized racism and oppression. We who had gathered there were there to reach out with love to one another, to seek and lift up those divine sparks, those fragments of light and wholeness, to remind one another that we were in this struggle together, that none of us could be free until all were free of the systems of oppression that ravage our society. We came in peace and love, but when we tried to march, we were stopped by a police force responding in fear. They faced the peaceful protesters lined up in rows with clubs and riot gear, determined not to let a single one get past. They were afraid. They were afraid that things might get out of hand, afraid because of the stories and images they had seen from Baltimore, stories that pitted protesters against the police, stories that left out that part about how institutionalized racism hurts us all, stories that neglected that interconnection that is part of our Universalist heritage, stories that served only to perpetuate that disconnection that is at the root of that which keeps us from the beloved community. If we have any chance of doing the work of Tikkun Olam, if we have any chance of salvation, of liberation, we need to be telling a different story. In a speech called Remaining Awake Through the Great Revolution, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote that all life is interrelated, and we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, he wrote, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. To me, this quote speaks to our work, our calling as a people of faith in a world filled with injustice. We work for justice not out of some small-minded desire to help, but out of a larger understanding that our salvation, our liberation, is all bound up with the salvation and the liberation of every other person in this world, whether they come into our walls or not. This is the story we must tell if we have any hope of building the beloved community. So how do we seek salvation then? Not by doing a few good deeds and hoping that we'll make it to heaven. Not by adopting a specific set of beliefs and trusting that we are one of those select few that are chosen. Rather, we seek salvation for all, by engaging, by participating in the long and difficult work of building the beloved community. Now, you may wonder what this story looks like. this new story. It can take many forms, but nearly always is a story of love reaching out in some way. So it's the story of Julia Ward Howe calling on mothers who were sick of seeing their sons kill one another to gather and demand peace. It's the story of the clergy in Baltimore who gathered on one of the first nights of turmoil and marched through the streets together praying for peace. It's the story that I've heard about the community dinners hosted here. Dinners focused on service, but even more importantly, on the building of relationship, the welcoming of friends and strangers alike. It's that story of tikkun olam, of seeking the divine light that resides within all things and lifting it up, working to restore the wholeness of our world. And it's the story of universal salvation, a salvation that depends on all of us, that none of us can achieve until all of us are free from the chains of oppression. It's a story of loving the hell out of our world, reaching out with love and engaging in the long and difficult work of building the beloved community. As we heard in the words of Rebecca Parker earlier, we are saved by every person in every time and place that has stood up for what is true in spite of threat. Like Socrates did, like Jesus did, like many others, maybe some in this room, have done. We are saved by the communion of saints. They shelter us. And we have the opportunity to be in their number, here and now. We are all participants in our own salvation and in the salvation of our world. So what is the story that we want to tell? What is the world that we want to build together?